Hey everybody, I'm Greg Soule, and this is Why Am I, a podcast where I talk to interesting people and try and trace a path to where they find themselves today. My guest this go around is Spencer Mirabal. He made film, he's played steel drums for a Christmas album, he's done screenwriting, poetry, published a chapbook, podcasting, which is about Murder, She Wrote. It's actually extremely entertaining. I think you should check it out. And he has a spoken word album. He's also a deep canyon of experiences and feelings. And while we only scratch the surface just a little bit, I'll carry some lessons like earn the moment, which I really like. Please share this with friends if you would like to help us grow, right? Help me expand. At any rate, I hope you enjoy this chat with Spencer.
And I'm so glad you love the menu. I feel like I can't talk about it with anybody because they've seen it and they're like, it was fine. But I almost went to the place of this is my favorite movie of the year. And then I remembered Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I felt bad knowing that was actually the best movie of the year for me.
Oh, did the menu come out in 2022?
Yeah, it came out at the end of the year. We saw it in cinema. So we saw it at Draft House. And then I know it's more recently come out on streaming and been a huge, major hit. And so I was kind of shocked, actually, that it wasn't Oscar nominated. Also, I'm shocked because that's always how it goes. But it's probably going to be one of those movies that does incredibly well, regardless of being acknowledged by any kind of like award body. It's also like not extreme enough to be like, oh man, did you see the scene where Ralph Fiennes like goes insane? Like it's so subdued, but so intensely so. And I think that's the part where people who vote for those things tend to only go for like, man, that guy screamed for 2 minutes and that was an award winner because he was so loud and so crazy. But I'm such a joy. I love the menu.
Yeah, for me, like I could tell when I really like something if it's one of those movies where I want to share it with other people. I want to like say, hey, friend, that you know that we like talk about this kind of stuff a lot. You should check this out. It's pretty cool.
I was in a writers group 2 years ago almost, and it was a new group. One of my best friends invited me to it, but it was all his work buddies, like a screenwriting group. And at the time, I wasn't really writing a lot of screenplays, but I had an idea, but more just wanted to get back into it and be around the conversation. And one of the guys there, and I would consider one of my great friends now, solely because at the time this movie called Pig had come out with Nicolas Cage, which was meme billed as it's John Wick, but the guy, they take his pig and then he goes crazy, which it is not. It is a movie about grief, and it is a movie about, it is so quiet and subdued and so strong in moments. And there's one scene in it that's particularly subtly stunning. It's really incredible. And I remember my friend John at the time, who I was just kind of getting to know, and as we kind of briefly talked about Pig, and then I mentioned that scene, and I said, do you ever think about this scene that happens where Nick Cage goes to this restaurant? It's one of his old people who used to work for him, and he clearly knows this guy's not doing what he actually wants to be doing, and he kind of gut checks him in that way. I don't want to spoil it. It's one of my favorite scenes I've seen in a long time from a writing perspective. And John says, I think about that scene all the time. And I knew I wanted to be friends with this person. I just loved, I loved the specificity of enjoying the thing, not just like, I loved it. It was cool. Also, sorry about the dog in the background. I might have to go check on him in a second. I don't know if you can hear him.
No, it's good. He's not coming through.
Okay, cool.
The audio
the panels work,
stuff.
Baby. We did.
Yeah, we're in there. All right, so we're breaking with formula because I actually enjoy the line of conversation we've got. So I'm not going to set up the crazy scenario and all that stuff. I'm just going to say, and I'm probably going to screw up your last name, Spencer Mirabal.
Close.
How do you
Mirabal? The way that that's phonetically what it say is Mira, like saying the word mirror, but with like a New York accent, and then Bal, like the first part of ballet. Mirabal. It's a Puerto Rican descent.
I dig it. All right, so I'm gonna forgo we run into each other in a weird place and all this stuff that I normally do because, man, we're already in there. We're already doing it. So
The world is a weird place. We're always meeting in weird places, I suppose.
Absolutely, for sure. Well, you and I genuinely met at a writer's thing, one page salon, and that was really cool. This was my first time to go, and I was thinking, you know what, maybe I'll meet some interesting people, and sure enough, I did. There you were. So you are very passionate about movies, I see.
Yeah, that's my initial background. I was thinking about how much I love the title of your podcast being "Why Am I?" Because I often feel as an artist, the question of like, who are you? What do you do? What's your medium? Changes for me so much.
Hmm.
It's like a roulette sometimes, and often it's driven just by the place in life I'm in, the thing that interests me the most in that moment. Um, you could research all the things that I've done artistically and miss the fact that I was in a steel drum band and recorded a Christmas album. And that was a thing that I did. And I forget that I've done that sometimes. But film was the thing I went to college for. At the time, I was really into filmmaking. I was really into screenwriting in particular. I wanted to pursue that. And I'd had an acting background. And by acting background, meaning I was in 3 musicals in high school and thought, hey, I'm pretty good at this, I think. So pretty limited background in acting, but always a part of my life. And at the time, and still true to this day, I really love movies. I really love the way that they're structured, the way that they incorporate sound and motion all at once. I love music, and I think often am manipulated by movies that involve music or sound in a way that is particularly emotional or dynamic. But it often is the nice backbone to the other artistic things I do, filmmaking being a way to explain the way that I create in terms of structure, in terms of multimedia, and incorporating other elements of things into another thing and trying to find a way to collaborate. I think collaboration too, in a place where there are periods of my life where art has been very solo, mostly because a lack of trust sometimes in terms of me, but also arrogance sometimes. uh, be honest about it. But what I loved about film was the collaboration part. I loved that about screenwriting in particular, writing in particular. It's not just the idea that you have, and that's the one and only idea, and you did it. Your idea is the best, and no one's ever written this idea like you, folks. It's about what you were just speaking about, of somebody finding just the same parts of it interesting and finding a way to elevate that with another idea or a complementary idea. There's something so manic and beautiful and and stressful about that kind of creation, but it puts people first. And I've forgotten that, remembered that, forgotten that, and at least when we're speaking, remembering it, I suppose, how much that being a part of creating is important to me. And more fun. You're just talking with people and you're creating together, and that will always be more fun than and more joyful than just saying my ideas are better than everyone else's are.
I've also noticed that like trying to create something in a vacuum for me is incredibly freaking difficult. Like if I don't have something to bounce off of, or to like somebody to add a little extra something, and then I can completely diverge and go a different direction. Like for me, it's so hard. I guess I'm just not. My brain doesn't work in that fashion. I need additional stimuli, additional input.
I feel the same. I feel the same way kind of about what we're doing right now, where I often at one point thought about doing like a solo podcast, because I really enjoy this show called Dead Eyes. I don't know if you've listened to it before. Mm-hmm. So this actor who got hired for Band of Brothers got fired by Tom Hanks himself. Not actually the one-to-one, but Tom Hanks directed that episode and he fired him, and it set the stage for his whole life and his whole sense of rejection and whole sense of identity. And then the show is him trying to unpack that rejection, and it's really, really funny, and really he's an improv actor, really, really funny, really, really charming. There's a lot of solo writing components of that, but also there's a lot of conversations to that. So at one point I thought about doing like more of a solo podcast, but then I found that to be very, 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 very empty, because my favorite part of doing those sort of things is the conversation and all the ideas you could have thought were going to happen in that moment, and they completely zag away from that. It becomes something so much more. That can also be really, like you said, stressful, because you have a vision for something and it's not exactly quite what you hoped for. And that's when I found myself the most creatively kind of in a seesaw, I suppose, where do I compromise this, or do I put my foot in the sand and am an asshole, or I'm not somebody wants to work with. And it's kind of like what actors decide the way they're going to say a word. I'm going to say the word like this way because I've practiced it in my room, and it's going to sound like this, and it's going to be so funny or so dramatic, and it's going to be like this, and it's so soulless because there's no sense of what it's actually about. Is you're saying it that way because your character feels this, and then when another actor says the words in the way they're going to say, how do you actually feel about them? I think I spent a lot of my life not listening enough, and it's something I'm trying to be a little more present about, creatively and personally, obviously. And sometimes those two are intertwined a little too deeply, though.
What makes you think you haven't listened enough? Just the fact that you've done so much stuff solo, or felt like you needed to?
Well, I mean, both from a literal standpoint, I have a little bit of hearing loss. I've had 3 ear surgeries when I was a kid, and then the era of iPod headphones blaring that music. Our generation is going to be a really interesting generation when we're older, because there was people who listen to things with headphones before us. There's headphones before the 2000s people. But the amount of immediate use of headphones with, things like iTunes and Spotify, I definitely have had some hearing loss. And I think kind of what I was just describing to you a moment before, I think I was more obsessed with the way I was going to do X, the way I was going to say this line, the way I was going to think of this shot. I think this is more certain periods of my life. I wouldn't say this is true about all of them, but I think there were periods where I got really obsessed with wanting to have a vision and have a really strong vision and have people just like that vision. I really looked up to filmmakers who were this is the way I do things. David Fincher, Paul Thomas Anderson were 2 of my favorites for a long time. Wes Anderson is another example of this, where you can't not think of Wes Anderson and think of things in the center of the frame, the way the shot moves around in a very particular way. And we look at that and go, wow, what a vision. I bet that dude has a really hard time collaborating, but also not. Think about all these actors who want to work with him, all these actors who want to speak his dialogue in this particular tone. So I think I got really enamored with that kind of way. But then with that comes just an emulation kind of thing. The best way obscurely to describe it is in the movie Cool Runnings, the Jamaican bobsled team sees the Swiss team, and they're so incredibly talented. And so the leader sees that and goes, oh, we should be like that. And so he changes the way they do things in order to be the right way. I'm doing air quotes again in media audio format. And then they're not good because they're not true to themselves. And I think the real forever lesson that I'll always have as an artist is trying to be true to myself and not the way that I want people to see me. Those two things can be the same thing, I suppose. And I think I was very anxious about not being perceived in a particular kind of way, or my art being enjoyed in a particular kind of way. And that's more of just a personal insecurity, I suppose. You can tell I've been in therapy very, very lately because I'm just bringing up things I've brought up many, many times. many times. Wanting to be seen and heard, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, isn't that generally why we create art? Is
absolutely
so that we can convey an emotion for somebody else to feel the way we feel. And if you feel it wrong, well, it's like you're enjoying this thing wrong, which was some stuff I've had occur to me before. It's like, you're not enjoying that the way I would. Like if I share a movie with somebody and they're like, this was the funniest thing. It was like, but it was serious. This part was serious. You were supposed to take. It's like you're enjoying it wrong. So that's kind of.
And you take those moments so personally too, or you show somebody something, and then they go, "Yeah, it was pretty good," and you're like, "You didn't appreciate it." But the truth of it is, if even you and I watch a movie, we're watching 2 different movies.
For sure.
We have this whole different life experience watching something that, in no way, shape, or form, any 2.5-hour experience will boil down someone's entire life. It is so much more than that. So yeah, there's something so personal about sharing something you love, film, music, TV, anything like that. And then for someone not only to not necessarily enjoy it as much as you, but also not necessarily quite get it, that's another blow. That's another like sword to the heart.
Yeah, it's something else you were talking about. somebody who has like a vision and executes it, like you said, Wes Anderson. I always think of like interesting color palettes, right? Because it's like this strange color palette that persists throughout or whatever. But when I think of that, I think of like rigidity, right? And so to me, it's like they have this vision and they want to execute in this very specific way. But to me, that feels like very inflexible. And most of the artists I've talked to say that, and I found this to be true for myself in a lot of stuff. Not everything, but a lot of things is I'll have one idea of why I'm starting something or the meaning of this thing. And by the time I'm at the end of it, it's something completely different than I ever anticipated it being. And do you think that, well, I mean, I guess in a movie there's a certain amount of rigidity and you're not probably like skewing too much. So I guess it's just an entirely different medium I had never thought about.
That can be true and not true. When I made my thesis film, again, I picked somebody based on one conversation I had with them and thought, I need to work with you. I like you. My director of photography, Isaac Guy, we went to go see a screening of Her, which at the time was my favorite movie. I have not seen it in a long time, but I love that movie. I think it's so incredible. It just come out at the time. It was on the forefront of my mind always. Very forlorn love movie, And we saw a screening of it. I went to film school in Bozeman, Montana. So we went to this like local art center there, and he liked the movie. And at the time, the way that my film school worked is you had to write your thesis film and then pitch it, and only 6 films would get selected for each semester. So it would be 12 total for the senior capstone. And then if you weren't selected, you had to be a production head on a film. And some people didn't want to be a director of rights. They wanted to be something specific. Isaac, for example, wanted to be a direct photographer. He really enjoyed cameras. That's where he felt most comfortable. And so I asked him, hey, if I get picked, will you DP my thesis film? He said yes. And then we got picked. We got really lucky. And you bring up the word rigidity. I think a lot of it, again, is intention. I was very obsessed with certain kind of films, and I was just picking shot ideas because I thought that would be interesting. Oh, look, we should have a lot of headspace because I saw this movie and it was cool. But there was no intention related to the script. It was the first time I really made something like that. I didn't really make I wasn't the director of a lot of stuff in film school up until that point. And Isaac, one of my favorite people to work with, was very, very, he pushed back. He'd think, no, we need to make sure these shot decisions make sense as holistically with the whole film. And also we're going to be editing this. So these shots need to all like cut into each other. It's not just that frame looks cool and that frame looks cool. You need to make sure when you cut from one thing to another, it makes sense, but also like invoke something. And so a lot of my ideas with the shot list changed, and my sense of the movie changed because of Isaac. His authorial voice is right down at the center of that movie. He really made that movie happen. But even after all of that, you can do the shot list, you can do pre-production, you can plan all these things. When you get on set, it's going to change, buddy, because the space changes. You could think of the shots all you want to, but then you get into the location and you realize, oh no, that's not going to work. Oh no, this lens makes this room look like this in a way that I did not anticipate. And there are many times when, not specifically Isaac or I or somebody, but we'd say, you know what? We need to change this because of this. I think about one moment I think about all the time is Isaac and then my production designer, Kristen, another really great friend of mine. And by the way, both those people are doing very well in Hollywood. What a surprise. They're very successful because they're very talented and and push back on very rigid ideas like mine. And there's supposed to be a shot in the movie where a character opens a door and then we cut to a shot of the room and the room is destroyed and it's her room. And so everything that happens after that is her reacting in a really intense way. It's actually pretty intense. But the problem is you can't get to that intensity unless the thing she sees in that room is all of her life's work and all of her things destroyed. Doesn't make sense. So we dressed the room and it just wasn't working. And often also here's another thing with film. You have other people you're working with and you have a certain amount of hours in the day to make it all happen. It is not a play where you have many, many months to plan things and do it in one night. And I remember Isaac saying, like, we have to make this what I was just describing. He's like, the next thing that happens is her running downstairs and attacking her sister, who is autistic. There has to be a reason for her to be that upset to do this thing. Otherwise, this is not going to work. This is going to be really uncomfortable in a bad way. And we need to make sure the scene is earned. And the word earned comes up a lot with film. Like, you need to earn the next thing. You need to earn the shot. You need to earn the moment. And so we took an extra 30, maybe we were already behind, if I remember correctly. We took an extra 30 minutes where Kristen, Isaac, and I just sat in the room and said, okay, let's add more. If the sister came in the room and destroyed, how would she come through the room? Stuff that's like, we probably should have planned this long ago. But we had never been in the space. It was Isaac's parents' house, so it wasn't like we had an infinite amount of time to use the space. We also couldn't like damage that house.
Right.
But that extra time, the shot isn't particularly the most beautiful shot you've ever seen in the world. You know, the lighting's not perfect. Nothing's perfect. It's a senior thesis film. What a surprise. It's not an Oscar-winning movie. But the shot before of her looking in the room, cut to the shot of the room, is one of the most important moments of the movie because it earns the next moments, which are the most powerful parts. The next scene, 2 scenes after, are the most important part of the movie, in my opinion. And it doesn't play unless that moment makes sense. And one of the most gratifying moments of sharing my art with people was being in a movie theater and that movie was playing on the big screen. And when it cuts to the shot of the room being destroyed, I heard somebody gasp and say, "Oh no." And I thought, oh, I have them. It worked. Because we do this all the time at home. We're watching a horror show or a movie that involves characters. You know, we're responding to it because we're at home. We can talk out loud when we're home and watching things. We're like, don't go in that room. No, no. You know, like, you're sucked in. And I'd never quite achieved that gratifying moment of making something that made somebody react in that way. Because people cry at movies, you know, things like that. That makes sense. That's powerful too. Mm-hmm. But to have a moment like that where they get the context of what's happening for that character and they are with them, and the next thing the character does is a really bad thing because of it, it feels earned and it feels human. There's intention behind it. Why does she attack her sister? Because her sister destroyed everything that makes her feel not empty inside, and things that she is privately hiding from people. The character's a painter, and everything that it was her personal way of escape, and her sister destroyed her escape for many reasons before that. You know, the whole thing leads up to these moments. But I think that's why I really love the puzzle of film screenwriting and playwriting. Is how do you get to you don't want to write the end and then just build everything to it. You want to write your story and things come organically. They come as human emotions would come, and you're not overthinking about the way somebody has to say a line. You're not overthinking about, well, this shot needs to look like this because it's beautiful. No, it has to look a certain way because there's a sense of creative puzzle. And I there was a long period of time where I didn't do screenwriting, mostly because every time you write a script, you go, great, who's going to pay for this movie? I kept getting so bummed out about, oh, wait, these things cost a lot of money. Even these 10-minute movies, it's a lot of money. And at the time, I didn't have a lot of money. At the current time, I don't have a lot of money. It's not like I can throw down $20,000 and say, let's make this 5-minute movie. What? But there's something still so gratifying, and at least it's, again, and I think I said this to you earlier, a nice culmination of all the things I find interest in arts in kind of different mediums in one place.
Mm. So that moment, right, where the person got it and it clicked, was that something you had expected? Like, did the feeling where you're like, was that just like relief or exhilaration? Like, what was that?
It was like the second movie I've ever made. I'd made a film my freshman year of college outside of film school, like for fun with some people. And that was more just I'd never made one at that like that. And I had made movies and like home movies in high school, like I don't know if you remember Windows Movie Maker, but I spent a lot of time making dumb short ideas and then editing on Movie Maker, which only had one video track and two audio tracks, which in the context of making anything now, that's insane.
Yeah.
You can't even make a podcast on that. But La Violencia in Colombia was my thesis film, and it was kind of this is what I paid $120,000 for 4 years of film school to do. I should probably make something that I like. And it was a really deep learning lesson of everything you just described about letting go of rigidity, letting go of the personal. It can be personal without only being about you, if that makes sense. It can be something of self-expression and recognizing what I'm actually wanting to do is connect with people, not just tell them who I am. If I just tell them who I am, like I could do that all day. I could go on the corner outside right now and start doing that right now. But it's about finding a way to package it, or finding a way to say the words in a certain order to best explain something that you feel, not your whole life. Even on this podcast, I don't know, maybe we will. That'd be incredible if you were able to get my whole life story in an hour. How can you find a way to connect with somebody and then my favorite part of any art thing is the conversation right after. It was everything of how somebody felt with something. And when I made that movie, I don't think I expected somebody to react in that way. I don't think I expected anybody to react to anything I made in that way. I had made a play the year before, and there's another intense moment that happened, and even that I didn't get the same kind of response. But with the movie, it's about sisters. It's about relationships with your siblings, and it's very much inspired by my cousin who has autism and her sister. I was really fascinated to think about what their life would be like when they're adults, which they now are, and that's insane. It was like 10 years ago. And also it was about the relationship with my own brother and the disconnect that can come with that. And there's not a lot of dialogue in the film. It's very bereft of dialogue. It's very much about reactions and being in spaces and sound around people, but not necessarily dialogue you can hear. And I remember even when I pitched the film, in that pitch you have to do to get selected, I described that my favorite part of movies is when people walk out of the theater, what do they feel? When you walk out of Ratatouille, you want to go home and make some food. You want to go you're so inspired. When you walk out of Star Wars, you want to go home and make a lightsaber out of PVC pipe and beat the crap out of each other and wear the robes. And you want to feel like you're in it. When you watch my thesis film, I said in the pitch, I want people to call somebody that they have not talked to in a while and say, I'm sorry, or say, I miss you, or say, or not even get right to the heart of it, just say, hey, how's it going? Reconnect with somebody who you may have lost touch with. And one of the men who was an extra in it was my friend's dad, super fun guy. He only had context of like 2 scenes. It's like a party scene. So he had very little context to the whole movie. And when he walked out of the theater, he told me, I haven't cried in a movie in like a long time. And I just cried at your movie, and I'm going to go call my brother. And there was something so, even though in the pitch, well, I hope people do that. You say all these things. You hope this is the way someone's going to react. I don't think anything could have prepared me for him saying that. And it made me feel like maybe I was doing something right. Maybe I'm doing the thing I'm supposed to be doing, which is often what artists, I don't know how you feel about this, grapple with. Am I doing the thing I'm supposed to be doing? Am I making the things? Am I leaving behind something that people will remember? But I don't think it's about making something people remember. It's about making something that makes people talk to one another, connect with one another, and go do that thing they actually always wanted to do. It's to get the human reaction after, not to be remembered. And that's something I'm saying right now to you, but still my ego is like, well, I also hope that they remember. But also, can I have this as well? Can I have the sorbet? It's something I find myself constantly grappling with and constantly trying to be present about. Like, what am I trying to not leave behind? What am I trying to say so that somebody feel something and connects or talks, whether it's with me or anyone.
Mm. You know, it's interesting. You're the second person in almost rapid succession that I talked to this cartoonist named Jimmy Gownley, and he talked about how when he started this new series, he said, I want to write for a little girl that's really lonely, and her mom drops her off at the library, and she finds these books, and it gives her some solace. Like he like picked like a target. He's like, this is what I'm writing this for. And he said, I've had those people come to me, like, and they don't all look the same, but those people have like found me. And it's so funny because it feels like while you have a vision, right? This is a vision. Like you wanted people to, maybe connect with somebody they were estranged from or somebody they need to make amends with. And you never quite know which direction it's going to go. You have kind of an outline, but like you said, there was some improvisation to make it happen. And then the execution of that vision at the end actually happens. There are so few things in my life where I've thought, here's the vision for this. I try and execute it at the end. That actually provides. Like that happens so infrequently for me. To me, that seems so wild that people can truly do that. Because like for me, one of the big things I'm always trying to do is learn how to have a feeling and convey it in such a way to another human that they will understand that they will feel that thing. But yours goes even further. It's like a whole narrative you want people to understand and like take in and realize about, like have some kind of realization. Like to me, that seems infinitely more complicated and also seems like it would be more gratifying too.
And it's probably the one and only time it's happened. I don't want to make it sound like I'm like bringing out the hits. I do this every time I do this. I hear that story about the cartoonist friend or the person you spoke with. The thing that strikes me is not necessarily the specificity of it, but it's something that I really relate to, which is thinking about the way art is ingested, what people are doing when they're experiencing something. I just made an album of spoken word poetry, and that whole experience, way I described it was less about this is what I'm trying to say with it, and this is what the poems are about, and this is why. It was poetry with music. I collaborated with another friend of mine who's a composer from Berlin. It had nothing to do with any of the text, the poetry. It had everything to do with the place people would be when they would listen to it. You could listen to this while making coffee, while being on a drive, while doing something else, because I recognized by going to the show that you had met me at, performing at shows, poetry, felt really isolating for me. Even if people were there and they were listening to you, the thing you want people to be doing as an artist, right. It still felt kind of hollow. And it's really weird for me to admit that because I spent years running an open mic in Austin, all about that, and going to shows and spent so much of my time trying to chase that. But even just that one show I did at One Page Salon made me feel not to the fault of the show. I love One Page Salon. I love all those things I did. I'd never regret doing them. I think I was chasing something else, which is to make something somebody could experience while doing in their life, not stop everything they're doing to watch me. Even if my ego still wants to be seen and recognized and heard, the way I want to do it, frankly, is through a medium that people can go listen to somewhere else, or a play or a movie. Sitting down, choosing to go see it and experience something. That album, to me, when it came out, I set up like a listening party at a coffee shop that I wrote a lot of it at. And there were several little stations, and it was CD players, and you could listen to parts of the album on a CD, because a lot of the time when I was a kid, my parents were divorced. So I would get picked up for visitation, and we'd go on a drive to Olympia, or to go see family, or to go to Hagen's to get the JoJo's. And I spent a lot of time just sitting in the passenger seat of a car listening to music. And do you remember how the CDs, you could have them on like the thing on the top of your
the visor?
The visor, you could put like all these CDs in them. And I just have that distinct visual of putting on a CD and staring out the window and imagining something else. Huh. And when I did the album, the reason because I had done it as a book before, because that's what you're supposed to do. When you write poetry, it comes out as a book and you do it this way. A very experience that I did find no joy through. And with the album, it was very much reclaiming that medium in a way that made sense to me, which is whether or not I'm listening to poetry all the time is I'm not. But there's something that at least I could make the thing that I wanted to make in the medium that I wanted to make it in, and know that it was being experienced in a way that respected the person who was listening to it. I wanted to connect with people in that way. And often, like, when I have records at home, I'm listening to music in the morning, or I'm listening to my headphones to a book on tape while I'm making coffee. Book on tape. I'm listening to an audiobook. They're not called books on tape anymore, despite me saying it all the time. But more recently, I find that it is much like that cartoonist described. It is the little girl going and finding these books, and it is thinking of where that person is in their life and thinking about how you experienced art in your own way. I don't know what art you are into personally, or how you experienced growing up, or even just now, but think about it less of the art itself and what you're doing and why you seeked it out in the first place. What did you need? What were you looking for? What kind of relaxation were you looking for? What kind of challenge were you seeking? That's the conversation. The conversation is this seeking out, and kind of how we are talking right now. I had never met you before in my life, and you came right up to me. You're like, let's do this thing. I said, let's go. Let's do it. Because at the very least, you get to meet somebody new and see what they're all about.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking, because you said that doing the book version, and you called it it was detailed as a chapbook, which I had never heard of. I'd never heard of a chapbook.
I hadn't either. This is the terrible elevator pitch of what it is, based on somebody who still doesn't know what it is. I guess poetry chapbook is to a full-length book as an EP is to a full album. It has it has to be under 40 pages. They're often able to be made handmade, stapled together. It's kind of like a zine. Zines are usually very DIY. Chapbooks tend to be very much shorter, could be made very cheaply, and often have one theme throughout. One that is a good description of this is I read a poetry chapbook of poems written while the person was on the toilet. That's a good example of a mode of framing the whole piece. At the time, I was really into poetry. It was a way to escape screenwriting and be a little more direct and personal, and which is what I needed at the time. I needed to be, and more immediate. Film, we were just talking about it. You write the script, and then you get try to get the budget, and then you make it, and then you're in the editing room. There's so many takes so long to get to expression, and I was kind of tired of that, and I wanted something that was a little more right now. And then still took a long time. But the chapbook, I was very fortunate to get published through somebody I'd met through running the open mic, who had a small press. And it was, a dream come true. I grew up reading books. I had a little shelf in my house of my library where I made books out of folded papers, 6, 7, that kind of age. So I grew up in Portland, Oregon. Powell's bookstore is such a huge part of my life. And so to think, oh, I could have a book that could be there. There's something special about it. And again, I really want to stress this. I'm glad I did it, but it was still not quite the itch that I wanted it to be. Even performing it at the book release was odd. It just it felt more like stand-up comedy. Felt weird that I was up there. It felt weird that I was reading about my deep sadness in front of 40 people. And there was still some interest and joy from it, but the real joy was making the album. Got really into voice recording. I learned a lot. About collaborating with musicians. My friend Sam Akias wrote original music for the album with nothing more than hearing my demo of the voice part, and then hearing music that I sent him that I was interested in connected to those poems, and he created original music. And the thought that I'd be on an album was even more tantalizing, because music is probably my number one love. That's been kind of the backbone of my artistic enjoyment, whether creation. I can't write music. I would love to. It would make things a lot easier in my life to say I love the thing that I also make the most. But I don't. That's not part of my DNA to write music. But to collaborate with somebody who did have that, again, that theme of collaboration, I got to work with somebody really, really fantastic, and who helped make it not the thing I wanted it to be, but make the thing it was supposed to be. And that's Yeah, or the thing that I decided it was going to be. It was like, oh, it's going to sound exactly like this, and here we go. And he would write. There was one song he wrote, or one music composition he wrote for one of the tunes. Not at all what I sent the demo ideas for him to, but it totally fit, and it totally fit for the medium of what I described to him, which was people are going to be listening to this. Excuse me. People are going to be listening to this while making coffee, or relaxing, or going on a run. They're going to be experiencing this in a meditative, relaxing. They only have 20 minutes of their day to listen to something. What are they going to listen to? If they're going to listen to this, what are you going to give them? I think that's the other part of it too, is we have so much media content out there. There's only so many hours of the day that you can choose to experience them. What are you going to give them to make you pick your thing over watching Fortnite videos on YouTube, or whatever what the thing they want to do to relax, or to be challenged by, or to feel inspired by. So the book just didn't feel like the fit for me. Again, I know I met a lot of poets and they feel very comfortable in creating in that way, and it fits right for them. But I tried doing poetry in Austin for many years. I even now, I never felt like it was for me, but I was trying so hard to make it work. And you're meeting me at an interesting time, Greg, because it's like that was like my thing I was doing for so many years. And then just recently, after moving, I had this like really breakthrough moment of, oh, I don't want to be doing this anymore right now. Not that I ever will stop doing it, but for what I'm interested in right now, it's just not what I'm seeking.
Well, you were talking about the album was so much more fulfilling than the book portion of it. And I was trying to like put in my head as like, why would that be the case? And I was thinking, like for me, I've always, when you read something, you put your own spin on it, your own color, your own pronunciation. But when I heard your poetry version, so I've listened to most of your album, some of it multiple times. I think maybe I've listened to the whole thing. I'm sure I have. Anyway, I noticed you put different inflection in different places, different pauses, right? You do things with the words that I wouldn't, and it sometimes subtly changes the meaning and sometimes changes it a lot. And to me, it seems like it just gives you more control to convey that vision, that feeling. Do you think that's why it kind of, well, I mean, obviously you said music is number one, so being able to pair the two together is probably big, but do you think it just gave you more ability to convey your message?
I think you really hit it on the head. For me, at the very least, was there's a little more, it's not even just that it's more personal, it's more authentic. That was the word that I always thought about when I was doing it, because actually a lot of the album is some of the original demo recordings. I lived in like a studio apartment and tried to, I had no big idea of exactly what it was going to be, but I just knew I wanted to do with the voice. And I had been creating a podcast with a friend of mine, and I caught the voice vanity bug of, oh, I could be on an album. My voice is great. Fantastic. Here we go. Especially, I'm sure you've experienced this all the time with listening back to your own show, of just little things you hear, tendencies. Man, I say the word like a lot. I am talking very fast all the time. It's like the first 6 episodes of this podcast, listening back and editing them, excruciating, because you're hearing your voice, but you're hearing your authentic self, especially in a podcast. None of this is scripted. I don't have a piece of paper in front of me. This is not dialogue. This is just, here we go. This is whatever's coming the most authentically in the moment. And with poetry, the writing of it, I did find interest in just the way words crashed into one another. Nice sounding words, kind of like nice looking shots. I had no formal training, but found a lot of more of my inspiration from lyric writing, music, obviously, and just that kind of thing. It also captured the urgency of the moment of I just moved to Austin, pretty isolated. I had gone through a breakup from a long distance relationship and felt pretty alone, and also felt very like seeking out attention through being manic and being kind of like a cartoon version of myself rather than being myself, and not necessarily finding a lot of self-love in myself. And that is always going to be conveyed more in a voice for me personally. it's my opinion. I've read a lot of amazing poetry books, and real poets, like people who do it for real, capture that in the book. There's no denying that they capture in the book. I hear it. I can hear it while reading it. But for my writing, it will feel fake and will feel performative sometimes if it's not spoken. There's some poems in the book themselves that probably in the album probably should have cut that because they didn't fit, in the context of what I was making. But I'd already, set out to do the whole thing. I found while making it, beyond the music part that you mentioned, the voice part of inflecting and finding honesty. There's one piece in it that's about the time after I got broken up with and I went to a wedding right after, a great place to be. And it was really excruciating. And it had been many years since then. I'm in a really happy relationship now. I'm engaged. I'm doing, that was far removed from that time. But in the time, it was really palpable and painful. And we're also right after that, like several people I knew like committed suicide. I didn't know them very closely, but they committed suicide. One of the pieces in it called Death Has No Time for Vanity is about the time I was in the drive-through like 2 a.m. at like a Pete Terry's drive-through, and I'm on, waiting that long forever line, and I'm on my phone on Facebook, and I see that like this guy who produced my thesis film had killed himself. And then immediately after, I have to order a burger. Like immediately after, that's the thing I have to do. But to find a way to grieve removed from yourself, it was just I'd never experienced anything like that. And then another person I knew growing up who was trans, she killed herself. So we were all this childhood group of friends that knew each other. And there's no way I could capture the like immediate reaction to those things in a movie. And I needed poetry to do that. But then doing the album, I found a lot of strength and personal authenticity through saying these poems rather than through writing them, through having them on a written page. And I think even now, the things I'm going to be choosing to do moving forward with my art voice and is going to be the leading charge of that. Because I think there's something so inescapably honest about the voice. Even if you plan on the way you're going to say a word, sometimes it's not going to be that way that you say it when you're in the zone of speaking it or recording it. And I'm finding a lot of joy in that lately, like a lot of joy.
Do you think, one is authenticity, one is honesty. I've heard you say those. Do you think part of it too is a bit of catharsis? Like being able to say it out loud. To me, sometimes saying something literally out loud, even if I'm by myself, just putting it into the universe, it feels cathartic.
Partly, yeah. I there's definitely some truth to the catharsis of that. I guess another thing that I really struggled with poetry was it's my life, and now you're kind of having to deal with the fact that people will read or hear it, and people in your life are going to maybe think differently of you. Certainly, especially when you're reacting to things like breakup and suicide. It's easier to hide them in a movie. It's easier to hide them in characters, and at least at the time for me, hiding them in like scenarios. I recently found my old hard drive from college and found all of these screenplays that I wrote for my intro to screenwriting class. Beyond just the lack of knowledge of screenwriting and seeing like now well removed and much more versed, from an academic standpoint. I saw in those scripts just me writing the things that were happening to me. Like the dialogue was very one-to-one with scenarios that were happening in my life at the time, which is something I chose to do as a way to learn. I'm not going to like look back on that and regret that. It was definitely a building block of learning, but it's also in a film with a poem. It's me talking about me, about things that I feel. And yeah, I guess there hasn't really been a catharsis in a live setting. Like I ran an open mic at a coffee shop called Flat Track Coffee Roasters in Austin for many years. And the whole thesis of that show was getting people the experience to read something out loud as if they were in a setting like a living room with their friends at a party and they felt comfortable enough to speak what they wanted to say. Again, thinking about the scenario that would help them feel comfortability. And several people did that. They would get up and say, "This is the first time I've read anything ever," and we'd all clap for them because that is a triumph into itself. I never felt that same kind of catharsis. I didn't read something and went, "Man, I feel better now." But in the recording mode, yes, to some degree, yes. Whether it is in that moment or after the fact, the exhaustion of a recording sometimes can be the catharsis into itself of, doing several takes of the same thing. I don't know which takes of the recordings we chose for the album because that was all done by Sam. He did all the editing. Sam did all the work. I just recorded my voice on a microphone. That's what I'm trying to say. But there is some pieces where he's like, I picked this one, even if there was a mistake in it, or even if you it wasn't the perfect take because you were tired and I could hear more of this in you. I could hear more. I'd never heard somebody talk about a voice in that way. And I'd done movies for a long time, and I never thought about it that way of trying to pick the take that fit the mood of the piece and that fit the exhaustion, or that fit the agony, or that fit the romance or whatever, in the album that was there. And whether that comes out or not, I don't quite know. But I guess that's something I'm learning all the time with doing this, and I'll be continually learning as I'm doing it.
Yeah, man, that's growth, right? As we learn more, we do more. Something you said there is that a particularly tough time was right after the breakup. You went to a wedding, and I've noticed in my life, the times I've felt alone, I've never felt more alone than when I'm surrounded by a bunch of other people, and I have no idea why that is. But I guess it's sort of like none of these people around me know what I feel right now, or experiencing what I feel. Maybe it's something to do with that. I feel sometimes less alone. I mean, I'm surrounded by loud, obnoxious children, so it's not like a thing I have to worry about anymore. But yeah, times in my life, even when I was by myself, sometimes I would feel less alone then than I would when I was surrounded by people. But also being surrounded by people traditionally wasn't exactly my happy place, so maybe that fed into it a bit.
Do you find when you go to like public events, or like when you went to one page and if you don't know anybody there, do you feel even like an extra layer of loneliness of not knowing how to jump into a new conversation with somebody?
Now,
like, do you find yourself different in a situation where if you're in not necessarily this aloneness moment, but like if you go to a group setting, like an event, for example, and you don't know anybody there versus when you go to a group setting and you do know a few people there or know a lot of people there, do you find your feeling changes when you're in those places?
I think it depends. It depends on my mindset. So if I'm in a place where I think, hey, I could potentially meet some really cool people, or hey, I could potentially meet a really cool person I could talk to on my podcast, then it totally like 180s the way my brain is working, because I don't know. I'm assuming this is like the way you watch movies now. Now that you have the burden of knowledge, you can't see movies, I would assume objectively, where you just sit back and enjoy, and you're not looking at why did he choose that shot that was so awkward and choppy, or you know what I mean? It's like you're just kind of picking stuff apart. But for me now, like I a lot of times I have like my spidey senses are looking for really interesting people that intrigue me, and oftentimes intrigue me in a way that I don't understand, because that means that's a lead I need to chase. That's something I need to follow. And so in that respect, I don't know. I'm just kind of like a mousetrap, always ready to snap and grab somebody. You know what I mean?
That's cool that it's changed your way of those events, though, too. Because I feel like when I'm in those settings, I'm like, if I don't know anybody, I'll leave. Like sometimes I'm so uncomfortable, and I would consider myself a pretty extroverted person, but there's something about not knowing anybody that's very terrifying sometimes and crippling almost, to the point of like, I'm good, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna leave now. But you having that mousetrap, I suppose, as you call it, the way to at the very least seek out the seeking thing is a really cool drive for you.
But there are some settings where, because I was super socially awkward and quiet growing up as a kid, and I really didn't like crowds. I hated public speaking. You know, all of the traditional tropes of a nerd. Yeah, all of that stuff definitely applied to me, and I can still fall into that if I'm in an environment where, I'm surrounded by people that aren't my people. You know, it's like, because you definitely know when you're in a place where these these aren't my people. Yeah, I will just feel awkward and strange, and yeah, because usually I stick out. I don't look like everybody else in these scenarios. So, there's people usually give you a little bit of a buffer. And I'm not great at small talk. I hate small talk. I mean, I can do it, but it's
I feel like
just
there's just a
draining.
rotating 5 questions you ask people, and it's very much the same kind of, or you try to seek out the unifying thing they're into and just latch onto that sometimes.
Yeah.
I find that with like relationships with male friendships are very odd to me sometimes because often as it's you're either a nerd or you like sports or you're a particular archetype sometimes. And I found, again, kind of going back to that shish kebab imagery, I find myself liking all those things. So, but weirdly enough, makes it harder for me to connect with those people because I know that they like this one thing that I like, but I know they will never like this other thing that I like. I spend a lot of time with artists, and I'm a huge basketball fan. Sports in general, like a baseball, basketball. Love basketball in particular. And I know that it's never going to be a part of my friendship with some of my most loved, beloved creative friends because it's not something that makes them happy or they have any interest in. And then it makes me feel weirdly more alone, even though we have this thing in common, because I know that there's only a surface level of things we can talk about. I found that with film people a lot. We all love movies. We love movies. We make movies. We see movies. TVs. Let's talk about TV. Let's talk about a movie. The show that The Last of Us just came out. We're watching it too. Which is nothing wrong about those conversations. They're great. You're connecting with people. You're talking about a thing you're all watching. Great. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Is there any part of your life? It doesn't have to be personal. It's just, I don't know. I find myself kind of a really a mixed canyon, not a mixed bag, like a mixed canyon of things that I love very dearly and it would never change. But I did find myself in film school pushing them aside. Like I loved basketball and I would push that aside because I wasn't really a part of any of the friendships I had. Or when I moved to Austin, I really loved video games, but I would push it away because the things I was doing with other people, it's not something they're interested in. And when I was a kid, like I wanted to write video game reviews. There were old YouTube videos on an old YouTube channel from 15 years ago of me doing video game reviews. That was my life for a period of time, that's a common thing I will say. That was my entire life for a period of time. But it's all of those things that make up me, but I will find myself kind of sidelining certain aspects of me in order to feel connection because of what you're talking about, of what, the small talk, you can't in 5 minutes fully understand someone. And yet we will always try to make a friend and we'll always try to meet people. And those are all great connections with people. But long term, I found some people in my life kind of fade away once the full story is there. It becomes another form of isolation.
I mean, I was wondering, like, when you have friends, you said that you were kind of suppressing parts of you or I guess probably being your less authentic self, right? Mm-hmm. Were you afraid that if you shared those parts that people would drift away or they just wouldn't be interested or they would look at you in a different way and like they would see you as somebody else? And it's like, I don't like, I mean, what's the fear there?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, the good example of this is poetry. So I started doing poetry when I first moved to Austin. It was that, again, an immediate way to express stuff. And every time I would bring up with people I learned through film, because I worked for a nonprofit film school / co-working space. A lot of my friends I met when I first moved to Austin were all film people. We'd go to South by Southwest. We were all hanging out all the time. And then when I started kind of getting more into this poetry stuff, I don't want to make it sound like they're the ones who initiated like disconnecting from me. Like I sought out those other things and probably didn't make enough time for them also. But there was a sense of it's harder to entry point into you now. And people supported me. They came to some shows of mine or they come to my book release, but there was always this layer of, I don't really care about poetry and don't know how to enter that world without making fun of it, And so it was hard for me to keep friends long term sometimes because of that. I would say that's also partly on me too, because of my insecurity about that. I would then push myself away. I don't think I saw it that way until recently, but there's an element of feeling rejected in that kind of way. And the only way to survive is they don't like me, so I guess I'll just not pursue that friendship or not nurture that friendship.
Do you think you were doing kind of like preemptive strikes Like, oh, I'm afraid this is going to happen. So you would definitely just go ahead and add that buffer, which would make things more awkward.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And there's something to be said about now recognizing that and working towards not, feeding that beast, feeding that habit of loathing and disappointment and rejection, and instead choosing to not assume what everybody is thinking at all times is you. Guess what? They're not. They're thinking about
Yeah.
many, many, many other things
Yeah.
other than
Yeah.
you. No one will ever think about it yourself as much as you do.
Oh, for sure.
But that's hard when you're in it. And I'm sure you've experienced this to some degree. When you're in it, in the feeling of that, it's hard not to let that swallow you. And I think for many years, up until probably recently, and maybe it's still happening, and I don't realize it's happening. I definitely found myself sidelining or kind of shooting myself in the foot ahead of time, to at least justify why people weren't wanting to spend time with me or connect with me. And sometimes just people move on, and that's both a joyful thing too. You want to grow, and if people in your life aren't there for you, or if people are in your life because you and not because of the things you do, that's also a special feeling. But not overthinking it. You can't put the words in their mouth for them. They have their own words, their own mind, their own desires, and that's something I have to check myself with often. I have to remind myself, especially we just moved to San Diego, California, like 2 weeks ago, and I know nobody here. It is the first time I have not had something like the construct of a job or school or an activity that I do to meet people. And it has been there's still so much of a house to unpack and neighborhoods to learn. And I've never lived in California my entire life. So it's all new. And I'm very happy here. I love here. It's just so incredible here. But what the next thing for me is to meet people and to meet all kinds of different people, kind of like you were describing, seeking out just the interesting, not the interesting that only aligns with things that I think are interesting, but just the interesting. I often try to gravitate to the people that there is nobody else in the world like them. I want to meet that person, and I want to spend time with them and invest in them and invest in myself through them,
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, absolutely. Seek out, because I've done that my entire life. I've always sort of seeked out people that had attributes that either I didn't possess or I wasn't brave enough to possess. So, socially awkward, super quiet. And so I hung out with all the potheads and all the kids that would say crazy shit in class. Or as I quantify this one guy I was friends with as a kid named Charles, we went to this teen night at this like this dance hall thing or whatever. And he was the only one out on the dance floor, and he was doing the worm by himself. You know what I mean? So it was like I would gravitate towards people that just had attributes or something like that I didn't. And I think I still sort of seek that out and find that in others. But as far as the voices in my head, I've blessing and curse. My brain works a little bit differently than the typical person. So that part of me just isn't really there, which is good for like mental health, I guess, in that respect, because I don't spiral on stuff. I don't overthink things a lot of times. But it also, the other side of the coin, I can't always anticipate what people are thinking or feeling, right? So it's definitely like a learning process for me. So when I see people say that they like overthink, and they, my wife, she calls it, or I read a book sort of about it. I think they call it like fortune telling, like or something like that. Like, you will anticipate, or you'll run all these scenarios and figure out how this person's going to feel or think, and you'll react way in advance to protect yourself. And it's like, I don't tend to do that, which is nice. But also when I'm in the moment, sometimes I don't understand, like, why they think or feel. And it's this weird balancing act.
It's hard to do both or neither. You know what I mean? It's like what you're describing. Just even hearing you say that, I can't even think of a moment in my life where I wasn't that way, or the way that that you describe you are. It's kind of like grass is always greener sort of thing, where you think, oh man, I wish I just didn't overthink. but then there's always a loss of some kind in the way
Hmm.
you are, but it's accepting that as just who you are and not as a thing to fix. I think that's often the thing I think about in therapy is spend a lot of time thinking there's a lot of things in me to fix, which there are, absolutely, but that's not the only reason I'm in therapy. It's more to accept the things that I am and the things that I do, the why I am. There's the title. As just that, and it's not just like I'm this way because blah 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 blah, but given the whole, sometimes I'm sure you, in this one conversation when we listen back to it, I give a lot of context to get you to the place of, and this is the answer to your question 2 hours later. Sometimes it's just I'm this way
Yeah.
and nothing else, and I'm finding that to be something I'm trying to be more present in and be true to, and I can still be okay in knowing that sometimes I'm going to overthink what people are thinking about me, and I mean, frankly, that's why I gravitated to movies. It's like you can find a catharsis in scenario and conflict. I mean, I'm a first child of divorced parents. Avoiding conflict is probably the first thing on my resume that I then delete and realize nobody hires someone who says avoids conflict on their LinkedIn. But that is certainly a big part of what has gotten me up to here to this point is, finding the ways to make sure that there's no conflict, but then there's no humanism. Without conflict, there's no sense of just being honest and being true and saying what you want to say. And even if you express it through art, that's still, you can also express it in your own life. And that's another thing I'm learning too, is you don't have to just say all the honest things in your art. You can also say them in real life. It's incredible. Other people will appreciate it and then understand you more and who you are.
Yeah. That was something really powerful I learned. I would say within the last few years is that I can literally mold my environment around me to make me happier. Like if I am in a situation that reoccurs and I feel a certain way and I don't like that feeling, guess what? I can have an open and honest conversation about how something makes me feel. And guess what? Other humans will take that information in and adjust to work.
It's incredible.
Who would have thought?
What a surprise.
But it's like, I don't know, you get a small taste of victory like that, and then you realize, oh, I can keep doing that, and I can keep doing that, and doing that, and doing that. And it just suddenly, I don't know, it feels like anything is possible for me. like as far as just small bits of gratitude go a long way for me, telling people I care about them, or shit, when I open my drawer and there's fresh laundry in there, like that truly sounds something that makes me happy. And just like sharing stupid stuff like that with people, it's amazing how far that goes.
Little joys, everybody has them. It's always so personal to you. I think that if you've listened to the album, there's a poem they called West America. It's like there's a line that's like there's always a secret love of your life, and that lists very hyper specific things that may not sound very romantic or like amazing. About that poem is about Portland and growing up in Portland, and there's something about little joys like that only will fulfill you, and there's no shame in feeling those things or expressing those things like I need or I want this, I want this kind of life, and only you have the power to vocalize that. Going back to the voice, I think maybe going back to your earlier question about the voice, it's only you have the power to express what you want. And no matter how much time in your life you spend having other people tell you what you want, or thinking that, I think in my work a lot, I often think of, you'll even hear me say it a moment ago, saying the word I need this versus I want this. Need can have a kind of like transactional demand feeling. And I think the poem I read at the thing you were at had a tinge of that expression of friendships and feeling like I'm putting a lot of demand on them. And, what I think the poem was about, drinking in order to feel accepted, but then paying the price of being hungover, which is awful. Want, desire is something that is almost like a foreign word to me. Like saying the phrase, I want da 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 da. It sounds so simple, but I didn't spend a lick of my life saying that. I always felt like I needed or I had to, or I have to do this. I need to do that, and then especially with art, like what a better reason to procrastinate on art than making it feel like a job rather than a joy and a thing you want to be doing, a thing you want to express, and something that makes, like you were saying, that makes you happy. That, the laundry in the drawer, is something that only matters to you, and that's okay. You can selfishly want that, and that's great. Because at the very least, people will actually know who you are
Mm.
and
Yeah,
what you want.
exactly. And if you express what you want, people don't have to guess. They don't have to do the fortune
No,
telling. Like
it's a
they
lot
will
easier.
literally know. Like it can
Yeah.
come out of my mouth into your brain and you will know. It's so easy.
What a concept.
But yeah, we train ourselves to minimize what we want. Yeah, like I grew up learning that I had to be invisible, right? And so things I wanted or needed, I didn't express them, and it was definitely smooth things over, mitigate. Be the
Diffuse the
calm one.
conflict, make sure
Yes.
the blame is put to you and no one else, so that no one else feels the wrath. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's many a variation of that whether you experience uh, conflict in whatever way you experience conflict as a young person, um, makes you feel like you have to. You feel like you had to do that to survive. You feel like you had to do that to save others and sacrifice yourself, or whatever the reason is for you at the very least. There's, man, it's a trip. It's wild.
Yeah. So much undoing of that stuff. But
Yeah.
talking about gratitude, I talked to somebody. It's strange. I literally change every time I talk to somebody. I become a better human every time. And I talked to somebody on here named Molly Balloons, and she taught me the concept of pet faves. She says, I don't have pet peeves, I have pet faves. And so she picks out all of these stupid little things that just make her happy, and she points them out. Just through the day, she even makes lists and all that stuff. I don't necessarily make lists, but I've definitely made a habit of when there's a pet fave, there's another human around, I will tell them about it. And it is so funny how much like my gratitude meter is like skyrocket. I'm envisioning it looks like, like the old school temperature, like thermometer, it's like I get like my happiness thermometer has gone up just from doing little stuff like that.
I really love that concept. I haven't even quite heard it described in that way, but
I hadn't either.
there is something that resonates with me in that regard, of whether it is little specific things people do or that you do, or even just like environment. A big part of moving to San Diego for me was the ocean. And because my fiance wanted to move here already, she had, gone on a trip and loved it here, gone a couple times. And, obviously it was before we were engaged, and I truly deeply in love with her, but also I had never been to San Diego, and I don't want to do the thing of I'm changing myself and my life to be with you. I wanted to make sure it also was a place that I wanted to be. And of course I would move there regardless. If it was professionally or personally, she loved that. But I also wanted to make sure that I was on board. And we were flying in around the evening time, like 4, 5, 6. And this was October. So it wasn't dark yet. It was still sunset. And we're flying in, and there's the shimmer glow thing. And, we've been in the sky all day. So it's like, oh, is that a cloud? What is that? And I realized it was the ocean. And I had grown up partly on the Oregon coast. Like we would go down to, Seaside, Manzanita, all these beach areas in Oregon, which are also very beautiful. And I didn't quite realize until that moment how important that was a pet fave of mine. The simple joy of being near an ocean. I wrote my thesis film on the beach of Edmonds, Washington, where my mom lived at the time. And that was a big joy for me. I often found myself just standing in the water and being there. And I don't have because I saw this and because the water felt this on my feet. It just is a feeling generally that makes me feel joy. And I knew, and the trip itself also was great. We had a great time. But it was just in that one moment that I didn't quite fully capture and understand until then that was something I wanted. Not that I need to be, I need to be in this city because this, or this is the thing I need to do professionally, or like this will take me I want to do voice acting now and I'll be near LA. All those things can still be true, but I have this desire removed from all those things. That's just, oh, any day of the week, I can drive 15 minutes and be sitting on a beach and do nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that's a pet fave of mine. I love that phrase. I'm with you though too. I don't know if I'd be like, I'm gonna get a list now and I'm gonna do that. That's the way that she does it, then that's her way of experiencing it. I would imagine doing a show like this, you find little moments of learning through people all the time. And that's partly the drive for you.
For sure. Absolutely. Like, I have these things called asterisks. Whenever somebody says something that I like, I put an asterisk by it. And you said earn the moment. That's one of the asterisks. I like that. Yeah. I like the idea of the concept. There's many. I just wanted to point out that I am paying attention. But to me, like, the idea of finding this thing that it almost feels like it's something you lost and then rediscovered, like you put on an old jacket and you found a $20 bill in there. Like, oh my gosh, do you feel like it's a want that you deserve? Like, is there this idea that I don't deserve this, or I don't need this? Like, have you worked through that portion of it?
I would say that is a component of why I haven't really pursued a lot of things I haven't pursued. A moment of the way it's been described to me through therapy is withholding. It's, I want that thing, but I'm going to withhold joy, withhold desire, hold back because of what I deserve is not that. And there's an element of self-harm that comes from that mentally, emotionally. It's kind of a really nasty spiral, I guess you can get into. I think it can be both. I think you can both want it and not deserve it. Like, I don't know. Deserve is really, I have a complicated relationship with the word deserve. It's kind of like I can want it and not, like, why would I need to deserve it in order to be allowed it? Like that. I think that's the thing that I would self-impose upon myself. Oh, you shouldn't like acting. Here's a great example. I loved acting in high school. I grew up doing it in children's plays, and then musical theater is a big part of my family, and it was a big part of my high school. It was whenever a musical was coming, we'd learn what show was going to be. I'd buy the CD of the album, of the record, of that production, and listen to it and listen to it and listen to it and listen to it and try to find the character I wanted to be in it. And, it was a big part of my life. And when I got to college, I was like, oh, well, I shouldn't act because then it would just feel like work. What? And I did some acting in college too. Lo and behold, I still found myself in acting. What a surprise. I still did the thing that I love to do, regardless of my self-imposed misery. And then I moved to Austin. Same deal. Well, I'm a director now. So like, I like talking to actors. This is a comedic part. This is not actually how I feel.
Yeah.
I don't do the acting thing. I think one of my big regrets moving away from Austin was not acting and more stuff. I absolutely would have done more if I had chosen that path. I'm not going to fully regret it because it is a thing I chose to do. I just know that is the past. I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm here now. But to sideline, again, what we were talking about earlier, sidelining a part of me because it doesn't add to the idea that I want people to see in me. What? Acting is a big part of my life. And now, personally, I'm pursuing more playwriting, mostly because I can act with my friends and stuff. I don't have to decide that I'm not also allowed to be doing these things anymore because my path is supposed to be this now. There is an element of that many times over in many things that I do. But I'm breaking away from that slowly but surely. I'm breaking away from that mindset of you only can do things that you deserve.
Yeah. I think
we deserve anything. We deserve anything we want to deserve. There's no roadmap in cursive telling us what we're supposed to deserve and have and want and do. There's no fucking such thing.
Yeah. I mean, there literally is no manual. right? You don't open it up and go to page 54 to figure out how to live your life, right? It's just,
No.
you just do the things that bring you joy and help those around you, and you just keep going day by day, picking out those pet faves, man. And I also like the idea that you're engineering scenarios to where you could just hang out with your friends. Because like I've done the exact same thing. Like my very first podcast I did, which was a technical one that I ran for a decade, it was really just an excuse for my friends to get on and talk to me every 2 weeks, just like for us to hang out.
The podcast I did, Murder We Watch, which I don't know if you've gotten a chance to find it yet.
I have, and it's really fun.
Thank you, man. I was just talking to Jake, who made it with me, about it. And that podcast is a perfect encapsulation of everything you just said. It was pandemic. Jake is one of my best friends. He and I will get in these phone conversations that last forever. They never start with, hey, man, how's it going? They always start with like a bit or like a voice thing or like just jump into the middle of the conversation already. There's just like a very specific way that we talk to one another. And I feel really grateful that I met him. And at the time he lived in LA and I lived in Austin. And he said, I have this dumb idea, which many times we have conversations, we have dumb ideas. I have a dumb idea. I want to make a podcast about Murder, She Wrote. Have you ever heard of Murder, She Wrote? I'm like, it's like that show you've always heard of and never know quite what it is. He's like, what if we watch every episode? That'd be funny. Ha, 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 ha. We'll never do that. Like 3 weeks later, I think we were just hitting that pandemic wall of, I need to make something. And we did it for months. We did the whole first season of Murder, She Wrote, which is 23 episodes. It's a lot of show. And I had never done a podcast. I was a fan of them. You know, I love the mostly sports podcasts, and Dead Eyes was coming around that time. And there's shows that I liked, but didn't have quite the authorial voice of how to be a podcaster. I just knew I liked them. And so making that with him, of course, there wouldn't be an idea that we'd do this forever. Also, spoiler, we're not going to do any more Murder We Watch. It's just we didn't even like the first couple episodes, but it was kind of like we have to do this now. But the real joy I found from that show was I get to talk to my best friend every week and I get to make something with him. And we're thinking about doing like a finale episode that, like, you know, we finished recording the last episode in 2021. It's been a long time since we've worked on the show. Or 2022, one of those. It's been so long I can't even remember. But we wanted to do a finale that was more like a clip show of our show, like moments of the show that were those moments of joy between friends. And also our guests were really funny. They were our friends. You know, it wasn't like we brought on the co-writer of episode 5 of, you know, it wasn't about the show. It was just about, let's get our favorite people in the room and like watch this insane 1980s crime show that, weirdly enough, defined a lot of how crime shows are now written. You know, that show Poker Face that's coming out, the Ryan Johnson show. It's a whodunit murder show based on Columbo, kind of, which is another Murder, She Wrote adjacent, fuddy-duddy midday TV, or no, like you know, more catered towards people 50 plus kind of thing. And it was just an interesting thing to dive in together, but also just to talk to one another and riff and joke and be really bad at comedy. I think my favorite, our 1-star reviews of the show are like, they talk about sex a lot. And it's because they listened to the first pilot episode, which has a lot of weird sexual vibes to it. Like, I still feel that way. I stand by that stance. Weird vibes with, like, everybody wants to have sex with Angela Lansbury in this show. This is very weird. And an understandable review, but then the best way we could ingest it was by reading that 1-star review aloud in one of the episodes, because it was just an honor that somebody took the time to hate the thing we were making enough to like write a little blurb about it.
I think it's complicated. It's confusing. It's like Canyon, as you described earlier. So it is about Murder, She Wrote, and you do have guests, and you guys have interesting bits, and it's commentary. You're making a lot of jokes, but also then you're breaking into like, oh, this actor that did this little bit part, they also were in XYZ, and then so it's like you're actually like educating me along the way, and I find that infinitely fast because I love a lot of things, but I love people like telling me something I didn't know and then kind of connecting all these dots together, and then you guys are just completely insane the whole way through. It is so much fun.
That was all Jake, the this actor who was in Such and So. He is such a wealth of knowledge of film, and he's a big film buff and TV buff, and just obscure B-list horror guy, boom boom boom. Whereas I am, if you've listened to the show, I'm like, oh, and that made me think of obscure thing. That's you. That was usually my role in the show, was to be like, oh, like the only way to describe it is obscure, blah blah blah. And there's one part of an episode where a character is having difficulty taking, like, the whole crux of how you find out about the murder is they have a roll of film, and there's some other part of it. Someone's operating a camera, and when I see that in the show, the way my brain works is I just think of something, third, fourth, fifth tier tethered to that. So I was like, remember Pokemon Snap, that video game? You could take it to a Blockbuster and then you could put the cartridge in and you could print photos from the game. And that was just I just stuck to that shtick, not on purpose. That's just normally how I talk to people. I wasn't like, oh, and in this episode, I'm going to make sure I say, again, that authenticity. There were times where it did not land, and we would often cut them out. I don't know if your editing process in these shows, but there were like stretches where like, let's cut that out because it is a long tangent and it serves nothing. But then there'd be times where we kept stuff in on purpose because the tangent was so much funnier than the real show. There was an episode where somebody orders a slice of apple pie and then with a slice of cheddar cheese on top. We're like, what? Like, that's so weird. And then we, in the moment, looked it up, and it's like a thing. Like, people in the East Coast like put cheese on their apple pie. And then that became a whole, like, what kind of like cheese would you put on it? Would you put like that string cheese thing on your pie? Would you put like, I don't know, it just became a whole, and the guests we had on were great. We would also often record at night. So often we would recommend guests to have one drink. Telling them to have one drink is just an invitation to drink. Unfortunately, we changed that very quickly. We started recording in the afternoon and the morning because of that. But the crux of it being I liked the learning too. I liked learning about, I loved Angela Lansbury. I think she's a phenomenal actor. And it was so odd to me that she sunk 12 seasons into this TV show. And she's like an acclaimed Broadway film star. But she was like, you know what I want to do for 12 years? Be on this really weird kind of on the rails show. Sometimes like, I don't know how we got here in moments. But yet here, you know what I found was weird? 6 other Murder, She Wrote podcasts were being produced at the same time.
Bro,
we were doing it. And I always wanted to tell Jake, like, we need to do an episode where we talk to those people. Like, why did you decide to also do this at the same time? The truth of being, it was pandemic. I think people were bored. People wanted to have that, the same reasons we did it. But I just thought it was so fascinating. I'm also very competitive. So I would like listen to their show and be like, oh, like, don't worry about them. Like, their audio quality is garbage. Like, we're fine. They tangent. The show does this. I'm very ruthless in that regard of like, no, we're better. We're fine. We were not. We were just the same as them. We were learning, and we were bad, and we learned fast because we had to do 23 episodes in like 3 months, which for any podcast is, I mean, you do this more regularly and it's a part of what you do, but I had a full-time thing and like had no time to find obscure audio clips from Pokemon Snap or this obscure B movie. I didn't have time to go from time code to time code. Can we insert a sound effect of this? It's a lot of work, but it always rooted in, I get to make something really fun with my best friend and be creative in a low stakes way. It's not like the Murder, She Wrote podcast is going to define me. That being said, when things happened to Angela Lansbury, like when she died, multiple people texted me. So it does feel odd to know that the first thing people thought about when Angela Lansbury died was, Spencer, that guy who made the Murder, She Wrote podcast, I wonder how he's doing. Very strange.
I don't know. People, people can make heroes out of anybody, I guess. And it's just them trying to show their support. Or maybe they just wanted a hot take. Maybe they hoping you had something spicy.
Nothing spicy. She's a great actor, and she should have probably not been in the show that long. That's the only spice I got for people. She probably should have done other things, which she did. She did Beauty and the Beast. She's fine. She's got enough money. She's good.
For sure. For sure. All right, man. I could literally sit here and talk to you all afternoon, but I'm assuming you have a life to live. And I want to be very respectful of your time because we are precisely at the time, very punctual stopping point. So right here at the end, I usually like to ask people if there is some way you would like people to interact with you on the internet, whether that's like some social media. Do you have a website? Is there something coming up that you want people to look at? Let me know. Throw it at them. What do you want?
This is the plug, the shameless plug, elevator pitch.
No, very shameful. Very shameful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really making a lot publicly facing right now. I guess things that I have out there that I would encourage people to check out is the album, Sweet Sad Sandal Boy. It's on Spotify. It's a spoken word mixed with music hybrid listening experience. Really proud of it. Really proud of the work. Really proud of Sam Akia's work on it, the music. Murder We Watched is very funny. I really recommend checking that out. Also on Spotify and anywhere you get podcasts. And there's other various little bits and odds and ends of things I've done out in the world. Check them out if you want. I'm at Spencer Mirabal on Instagram. It's mostly where I interact with socially. I'm going to be, I think I mentioned it very briefly, but I'm going to be getting back into playwriting, which could be a whole nother podcast, but I'm going to be doing them as, speaking of books on tape, they're going to be audio only. So I'm going to be writing plays and recording them with friends and releasing them for streaming. So they'll probably be through the same Spotify artist page I have, which is just my name, Spencer Mirabal. But I'm working on the first one right now. I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm really pumped about it and excited to explore a new medium.
Dude, that is so cool. An audio only play.
Yeah, the plays on tape is what I've been pitching as like
Plays
now that it's been recorded on podcast, it's canon. It's also copyrighted. You can't steal that.
Trademark.
I just really pumped about. I experienced a lot of musicals and plays as records first before singing them live, and I want to kind of going back to who I am as a person. Like that's something I want to explore too. Is try to make something audio, which you can do at stage too. If it's successful, it's something you could do as a stage play. So that'd be fun to like go back into the medium of playwriting, but also do it in a way that's on my terms and also just a lot faster to produce. I don't have to wait for a venue. I can just make it.
I also love the idea of that because that is exactly how I like to experience things. Like I love to hear it, it's like as I'm going throughout my day. So you're definitely hitting all the right buttons for me.
Awesome.
Make notes. All right, man. Well, Spencer, I really appreciate your time, bud. And very open, very honest. And I think the picture you painted is a pretty awesome dude. So zero fear about anybody judging you the wrong way. Hopefully that.
Thanks, man. This is a blast. This is just 2 hours. It's all right. I'll Venmo you for the therapy bill.
All right, man. Let me hit stop on all this stuff.